Namaskar, Suprabhat, a very good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I'm extremely grateful to Professor V.K. Mishra, Professor in charge of the BHU South Campus. I'm extremely grateful to our young friends and organizers at BHU for taking this initiative. And I must say that this is the first of its kind program after the G20 summit, which is taking place at Banaras Hindu University and perhaps across the country, which has as its aim the focus of trying to understand India's historic achievements in the historic G20 summit, a summit which is unprecedented in its achievements, which is unprecedented in its focus, and which is unprecedented in its futuristic agenda and roadmap. And therefore, I thank all of you. I especially thank Banaras Hindu University. I thank my young friends and colleagues at the Shama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation who are with you physically present today. I thank them for taking this initiative to bring all of us together to discuss the essence, the core, the spirit, the achievements of G20 under the leadership of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. I would have wanted to be with you, but pressing engagements in Delhi and pressing engagements in West Bengal has prevented me, has compelled me to make a last minute change. I look forward to joining you again in future very soon. Friends, I think you have already had a discussion on this and the discussion is ongoing, and I'm sure it has been extremely enriching. All of you who are participating in this discussion, in this very interesting program which is going to analyze G20, the G20 summit, all of you are what I have always termed and inspired by Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi's words. You are the Amritkal generation. You are not only going to take India forward in the next 25 years, foundations of a new India are going to be laid, is being laid, will be laid in the next quarter century. And you are the generation which is going to implement, which is going to realize, and which is going to see to fruition the goals, the vision that India has set for G20 for the future. I think this has been an unprecedented G20 in the sense Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi had given a call for Jan Bhagidari, for making this G20 a Jan Bhagidari movement where people will be involved, where people will participate, and people across the country will not only be conscious and aware of what this G20 stands for, what is India's mantra, what is India's vision, what is her message to the world, but they will also get an opportunity to participate. If you look at the uniqueness of Bharat's G20 leadership, the G20 summit that has just concluded in Delhi, you will see that there has been 220 plus meetings across India in 60 cities, and 25,000 delegates from across the world, from 115 nationalities have participated. 1,25,000 delegates have participated in various meetings in the last 10 months from across the world in India, and additional 32 countries were invited to participate in the G20 summit, and 43 leaders and heads of states, heads of ministries, heads of states have participated in this G20 summit. And very importantly for us, it has seen the highest participation from the African Union. ever in the history of G20. And this is what makes this G20, India's leadership of G20, stand apart from all G20s that have been conducted so far. Across India, 1 crore 50 lakh people have participated in various capacities, in various ways in the G20 movement. And Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation was designated as the secretariat for Y20. And I think among the engagement groups, the Y20 has conducted the largest number of programs across the length and breadth of this country, of India. It has conducted the largest number of programs right up to the grassroots, where every citizen, especially the youth of Bharat, were involved. Over 1500 programs from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, from Nariman Point to Nagaland, from Gujarat to Assam, the entire length and breadth of India has been covered. And there was an overwhelming response from the youth, overwhelming response not only in terms of participation, but in terms of also wanting to organize programs that were related, that were connected to Y20 and through Y20 to G20. And therefore, I think when in November last, when India took over the presidency of G20, Bharat's Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi had emphasized that he wants people's participation, Jan Bhagidari, and to really make it into a Jan Andolan, a movement, a people's movement. The G20 must become a people's movement. That is what he had said. And if you look at the manner in which Bharat hosted the G20 summit in Bharat Mandapam, which was one of the largest convention conference centers ever built, completely by Bharat's architects, by Bharat's artisans. If you look at the entire setup there, one of the core focuses was to showcase Bharat, to showcase Bharat's talents, to showcase her rich cultural tradition, to showcase her artifacts, to showcase her various achievements in terms of governance. This was the intention. This is what was done in Bharat Mandapam. And friends, if you look at it the other way also, there is another very important dimension, the spirit of Bharat's federalism. The spirit of cooperative federalism was evident throughout the G20 programs, all across the 10 months that they took place. Every state was encouraged, every state was supported to conduct, to host G20 programs. Foreign delegates, ministers, secretaries, experts from across the world gathered in India for various meetings in across 60 cities. Every state, regardless of which government is in power in that state, every state was supported and encouraged to showcase their uniqueness, their rich tradition, their artifacts, their artisans, their achievements. No state was left out. Therefore, in the history of G20, Bharat's leadership of G20, apart from the agendas achieved, is also unique in this aspect. It is, of course, for the first time that the G20 declaration, the New Delhi declaration under Bharat's leadership, it is the first time in the history of G20 leadership, in the history of G20, that a declaration was adopted unanimously, and it was unanimously adopted and passed even before the summit ended. So friends, I think if you look at it in this aspect, if you look at it against this background, against this backdrop, if you look at it in this context, the entire magnitude of India's G20 leadership becomes extremely clear. Every leader were given gifts. This is the established norm in any international conference summit of this kind. But Prime Minister Narendra Modi made sure that it was Bharat's, these gifts were the products that were put together by Bharat's artisans. So you had products from Kashmir, you had Sundarban honey from West Bengal, you had various unique artifacts from across the country which were then put into a gift hamper and presented. And have if you watched at that point of time, if you closely, I'm sure you did closely follow the summit, you would have noticed how and with such pride Bharat's cultural heritage. You may recall that Prime Minister, on the first day when he was receiving the heads of state, the backdrop was the great wheel at the Sun Temple in Konark. And on the second day, when he was receiving guests for the dinner hosted by the President of the Republic of Bharat, the backdrop was the Nalanda University, a symbol, one of the earliest and greatest universities in the world, a symbol, a reminder to us that Bharat was once upon a time a knowledge society, that scholars, students from across the world would come to Bharat to learn, to absorb, and to get educated, to get enriched. And these very students and scholars would then go back across the world, back to their homes, back to their countries, back to their lands and regions, and they would disseminate, they would percolate the message of Bharat's civilizational message of philosophy, of knowledge, of wisdom, of sciences. I think that backdrop of Nalanda, and then on the third day at the Rajghat, Gandhi Smriti, the uh, hut where Mahatma Gandhi would live in Sabarmati, that was the backdrop. And Prime Minister explained to every world leader what that was. Prime Minister explained to every world leader the backdrop of Nalanda. And Mahatma Gandhi's hut at Sabarmati symbolized the essence of mission life, where we start with ourselves, the mission to save environment, to conserve the environment, to transform our lifestyle through the philosophy and message of Bharat, where nature, we are interconnected, where nature is connected to our daily life, where we do not exploit nature but we worship her, where we take from nature exactly all that we want and not more than that, where we establish a balance between nature, between the individual, between our collective life. That symbolized Mahatma Gandhi's life and his living in Sabarmati. I think, friends, if we look at that, if we look at it in this way, the deeper symbolism of Bharat's leadership of G20 emerges. And as you very well know, Bharat's message was of the message of unity in a fragmented world. It was the message that we need to bridge, we need to reduce the trust deficit that has plagued the world all these years. When Prime Minister Modi hosted the Global South Summit in January earlier this year, it was done with the aim, with the focus of of sending across the message of equity in development, that the fruits of development must be distributed equally amongst all, that every country, however weak or backward that country may be, must have equal access to knowledge, must have equal access to technology, must have equal access to development, and must have equal access to all new discoveries, scientific discoveries that are taking place to enhance humanity's living standard. I think, therefore, the induction of the African Union, if you look at it that way, is unprecedented. It was unanimously accepted and passed. The African Union was left out of G20 all these years. To have such a large chunk of humanity out of G20 was unthinkable, and it was because of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership and India's championing the inclusion of the African Union in G20 under his leadership, that this was possible. I think this also will completely change. It is a major step towards a new global world order, a new global order. The Delhi Declaration was adopted unanimously, where international humanitarian law, multilateral system that safeguards peace and stability, territorial integrity and sovereignty to be protected, all these were discussed and were accepted. And you may recall that many experts, at least some experts, had given out extremely cynical, they were very cynical, they were very doubtful, they were not certain that the declaration would be adopted unanimously, but they were proved wrong under India's leadership, and it shows India's stature. It demonstrated India's rising stature in the world, where India could bring together disparate elements, disparate thoughts, opposites together, and commit them to a common future, one earth, and one family. And if you look at the key points in the declaration, the key points have in them all that India has championed, especially in the last decade across the world under Prime Minister Modi's leadership. A strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth. This was the mantra, it was the message of the Global South Summit, which Prime Minister has been continuously emphasizing at every forum, from the United Nations to other multilateral forums. Prime Minister has been emphasizing. Second is the accelerating progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, on the SDGs, Green Development Pact for a Sustainable Future. This has been adopted in the Delhi Declaration, and the International and the Global Biofuel Alliance to boost use of cleaner fuels. I think this was a path-breaking initiative. It was, again, after the International Solar Alliance, after India's championing of yoga, International Yoga Day, after India's championing of the International Year of Millet, Bharat's initiative of bringing together countries for the Global Biofuel Alliance is again, in a sense, a game changer for the future, especially a game changer in the entire, in our attempt, in our aspiration for a cleaner and a greener planet and a cleaner and a greener future. Multilateral institution for the 21st century. This is something which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has continuously emphasized, that most of the multilateral institutions, especially the United Nations, reflect a certain global order which is 75 years plus, which is more than 75 years old. And multilateral institutions must include countries which are at a disadvantage. Because they are at a disadvantage, they cannot be part of a multilateral institutions, is something which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has constantly spoken of. He has asked, he has appealed for a mindset change, and therefore reform of multilateral institutions, and multilateral institutions that reflect the spirit of 21st century, that reflect the aspirations of 21st century, that reflect the challenges of 21st century. Such multilateral institutions must evolve themselves to be able to do all of these. And then reinvigorating multilateralism. Multilateralism cannot be piecemeal. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be directed by a certain elite group of countries. There has to be consensus. There has to be equity. There has to be justice. There has to be inclusion. And only then multilateralism can reflect the spirit, the essence of 21st century. Friends, if you look at this, if you look at the Green Development Pact for a Sustainable Future, gender equality and empowering all women, this was a major push for India's G20 leadership. Technological transformation and digital public infrastructure. Digital empowerment, Prime Minister speaks of digital empowerment and digital public infrastructure. This is something which Bharat has championed, and this is something which has received overwhelming support from across countries. India's narrative, which Prime Minister has repeatedly emphasized, found overwhelming and unanimous support across the board. Adoption of principle of life, lifestyle for environment, mission life, using technology for governance, an extremely important dimension that Bharat has been pushing for. Access to quality healthcare equitably, promotion of millets to ensure food security, reducing land degradation, skilling of youth to meet future proof them, increased inclusive participation in the labor force, women empowerment, and last but not the least, an extremely important point, building of disaster resilient infrastructure. And new mechanisms have to be evolved to achieve these. And if you look at past efforts, there were 73 outcomes and 39 annex documents in this, including in the entire effort. 112 outcomes and presidency documents have been released. And Bharat's presidency of G20 has been the most ambitious till date of all G20 presidencies. And friends, if I may end with this, if you look at the essence, the core, the philosophy, the darshan of Bharat's G20 leadership, the philosophy which is game changing, the philosophy which is historic, the soul of Bharat's G20 declaration and leadership, it is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's call of a human-centric approach, of a human-centric and not a GDP-centric approach alone to global growth and to global welfare. I think that is what sets apart India from the rest of the world. And that is India's civilizational message. It shows India rising on the world stage as a responsible power, as a power that others look up to, as a power that others can depend upon in times of crisis and challenge. India is emerging today as a power which is solution oriented, which is compassionate, and which is driven by the goal of one earth, one family, one future. Friends, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you, for giving me this opportunity to address you. I wish you all success, and I look forward to more such interactions. I look forward to hearing from you continuously on these aspects. At the end, I would want to make one appeal to all of you, and through you, I would also like to appeal to your senior professors who are present there together, that I would urge you to look at the G20 declaration. I would urge you to look at India's points that have been included. I would urge you to look at this entire document and to undertake writing, to undertake research, to undertake such programs to further explain, to further examine this unique futuristic agenda. It is through such research, through such advocacy, through such discussions that we can keep the spirit of Bharat's G20, the vision, its core goal, we can keep that on the surface for people not only to know, for people to take some dimension or the other, to take these up as a mission and to take these forward in order to be able to really work towards building up a future in which India's leadership will be extremely highly valued throughout the world. Dhanyavad, and thank you so much.